For Week 5, and just as a reminder, the reading assignments are chapters 11, 12, and corresponding to the text chapters assigned, the supplemental treatment provided by the Notes to Syllabus document. You don't have to hand in the following assignment, but you are expected to work through the chapters 11 and 12 end-of-chapter technical questions and even-numbered application questions to ensure thorough preparation for the examination that will be administered. As you know, the text provides solutions to the previously identified even-numbered questions, so you can readily check to see that you are on the right track when addressing these questions. As part of the weekly assignment, remember you should select and be prepared to discuss a current business or economic event reported or analyzed by a prominent national publication that reflects a relationship presented by the reading assignment. To this point, we have explored a number of fundamental microeconomic relationships. We now shift our focus to major aggregate relationships addressed by macroeconomics. By way of example, gross domestic product is a measure of final goods and services produced within a country's borders over a given time frame. Two prominent and equal measures of GDP are the expenditure approach and the income approach. Thus, GDP simultaneously is a measure of national expenditure and a measure of national income, with adjustments. For an open economy, GDP measured as national expenditure equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M, where C equals consumption spending, I equals physical investment spending, G equals government spending, X equals export spending, and M equals import spending. National income equals W plus R plus I plus PR, where W represents labor income, R represents rental income, I represents interest income, and PR represents profits. GDP, the income approach, equals national income plus indirect business taxes, in other words, sales taxes, plus depreciation expense. The GDP figure periodically compiled by the Bureau of Economic Analysis and repeated on the news represents real GDP, that is, nominal GDP adjusted for inflation. Inflation, ongoing increases in the aggregate price level, is also an example of a macroeconomic relationship, as is the unemployment rate. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is responsible for calculating the unemployment rate and the inflation rate, as well as a variety of additional macroeconomic data. As a point of information, the headline unemployment rate number we hear reported on the news is only one of 6 separate unemployment measures compiled by the BLS. Macroeconomic data, such as the categories previously listed, provide insight into how an economy is performing and how it is expected to perform, and such insight influences decision-making in the private sector as well as by government policymakers. On the subject of U.S. federal government policymakers, federal fiscal policy, that is, taxation and spending policy, is determined by the executive and legislative branches of the federal government, with the legislative branch having final authority. Monetary policy for the United States is determined by the U.S. Central Bank, namely the Federal Reserve. To digress for a moment, and as a point of information, the United States economy is classified as a mixed economy, meaning that the underlying social structure by which resources are allocated is both market-determined and government-determined. By way of example, market forces largely determine the groceries you select when you go shopping. Taxes levied to fund Social Security and Medicare are determined by the government. Returning to consideration of the importance of macroeconomic relationships, here's an aspect to consider. As you are undoubtedly aware, the last U.S. recession was the most severe U.S. economic downturn since the Great Depression. The Great Depression lasted roughly a decade and was a period during which the U.S. unemployment rate reached 25%. At the time, the conventional wisdom among economists was for the government to do nothing. In the long run, they said, wages and prices would fall sufficiently so as to stimulate aggregate demand, and thereby restore the nation to its full employment output capability. To which John Maynard Keynes responded, in the long run, we're all dead. The macroeconomic relationships presented by our text are considered mainstream in orientation, and these relationships are fundamentally Keynesian in nature. The importance of these relationships cannot be understated. Today, there is no debate among the most reputable economists, who have learned a thing or two since the Great Depression, that the countercyclical fiscal and monetary policies implemented to combat the last U.S. recession prevented a second Great Depression. We will be exploring the framework of analysis underlying these policies. As Warner Wolf, a well-known sportscaster from yesteryear, used to say, let's go to the videotape. For us, empirical analysis is the equivalent of going to the videotape. As we examine the historical evidence, we'll see why the fundamental macroeconomic principles provided by Keynes, while imperfect, have stood up so well against the test of time.